Yo, hello, and welcome to the Asheron's Call Mob Nostalgia tier list. So what I did is I went through all of the mobs in the game that are featured in the Town Network portal rooms, and I went through and I ranked them by a factor of nostalgia. So what I mean by this is that like how much this came up when I was playing and when I was growing up playing, and it's not necessarily something that everybody's going to agree upon because everybody had different experiences, right? Well, I'm just sharing one perspective, okay? So my one perspective of my playing the game and my um experiences with the mobs and all the different enemies and characters in the game. So what I went through and I made this tier list, and so what I'm gonna do now is reveal each of the things in the tier list alphabetically, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about why it's in the position that it's in, and maybe why I didn't put it higher, and stuff like that. So remember, keep in mind, this is my experience with the game. So your answers for this are going to be way different, right? So I encourage you to do the same thing and make a list yourself if that's something that you're interested in and you're not agreeing with this list. So anyways, with all that being said, I'm going to start off with the first thing, the Auroch, which is like a bull kind of NPC. I put it at C because I used to fight these like sometimes leaving and going to towns, but it really doesn't give me that like real immersive sense of Asheron's Call and like what the game has to offer. So I just put it there on C. These can also be reordered. I'm not set in stone in these orders. So this is just what I went through the first time as I went through, and I did everything myself, right? So next we got Armadillo. I put to A because I used to see armadillos all the time when I was a low level character originally in retail. And my older brother and his friends and I used to hunt at a place we called Dillo Beach, and it's like pretty nostalgic for me. I remember going there a lot with my brother and his friends and collecting armadillo spines to turn in and stuff like that. So that one makes it pretty high on my list. Now, Banderling, I put in S, like, because I just feel like Banderlings are one of the mobs that's like most synonymous with Asheron's Call, and there's like a wide range of them, going from low level Banderlings all the way up to ones you'd see in the Direlands and stuff like that. So it's a mob that I'm very well associated with, and I put in S because I felt like it deserved to be there, not just for the game and the lore, but as much as I fought them and played the game, there it's up there. Next is Burun. I put in C. I didn't really spend a lot of time in the dungeons where these reside, so that's why it got a lower score. Again, yours might be different, but that's where I have it at. Karenzi, this one I could see going higher, but the reason why it's not higher is because I only saw them on the new island and in short doses. So I just feel like it didn't really like fit the bill for a higher tier one, even though I could see moving it to B and that being fine. All right, so now we got the Chittick. I put this D because I didn't really spend a lot of time fighting these or encountering them at all. So for my personal experience, it's pretty low on the list. All right, next up we have Crystal. This is S tier for me. I spent a lot of time in retail, like original retail Asheron's Call, trying to get shadow armor, greater shadow armor, and fighting all the shadows and the shard, the crystals for shards. So this goes pretty high on my list, and like if there was something above S, the crystal would be there, if that makes sense. Like everything kind of bunches up in S when there's a lot of stuff, but I think some of the ones in S are like S plus, if you want to say that. So that would be one of those. Doll here, I have it B. I remember fighting these and seeing them, but it doesn't really like give me that much nostalgia or like lore feel for the game, even though that's like, obviously every mob has its own lore and it's pretty important to the game's lore, but this is my personal experience again. So next up is Drudge. This is another one just like Banderling, where you're fighting him from low levels all the way up till, Direlands and higher levels where they have different, more mutated or more stronger like drudges that you can find. So that's a pretty for me, and also a lot goes into like the sounds that they make. Like the Banderling sound, the Drudge sound, Crystal sound. Like they're all very like synonymous with the game and my nostalgia aspect of the game and for how I feel about the mobs. So that's a big part of it as well. Next, I got the Eaters in A. I put these in A because the Eater experience quest that you have to kill Eaters, and I remember spending a decent amount of time on that. So this is definitely A. It's maybe a little off from being an S, but I didn't put it in S. Next is Fyun, which is you find in that there's a couple quests where you find them and you have to fight them. So I put it pretty high for how like the ratio of how often I saw them or how many I've seen of them is pretty low, but how like much they fit into the lore and how cool I think they are and stuff like that makes it a little bit boosted up. So I put them in B. Next is Gear Knight. Now this is in C. I would have this higher because I know that people can make Gear Knight characters, but what I'm referring to specifically here is just the mob of Gear Knight. So I didn't spend a lot of time fighting these and I didn't see a lot of them, so this is like a pretty low score for me being in C. Next is Golem, which is an easy S because of all the time my brother and I spent fighting golems and going to like halls of Midos and to get Atlan weapons when that was like the meta thing, like you wanted your Atlan weapon and your stones in it and all that. So every single kind of golem is really nostalgic for me, and the sounds they make, like when they rise up from the ground and all that. So I think that's a golems would be like another S plus. Like I'd put it above even other ones that are an S. Next, I got Griever, which I spent a lot of time fighting in the Direlands and definitely seen a lot of them. So the amount of times I fought them is going into this factor. Like the number of them that I've seen, like as far as variation, is kind of lower compared to other mobs, but I fought them a lot, so this ended up in A. Grommy, I remember the earliest levels starting to fight these, and we used to like try to get their teeth and for the turn-ins and stuff like that. So it's very nostalgic for me, and my older brother and I like spent a lot of time fighting these and going around the beaches and stuff like that. So this one I could see easily going down to A or being like one of the ones that's not S plus, but it's still hard for me to not put it in S just from, again, my personal experience of how many of these I saw and fought. Like it was quite a bit, so that made it into S. Idols goes into B, because I remember this being like added to the game, and I remember thinking they were cool and seeing them a decent amount, but it doesn't rank higher on the nostalgic factor or like the number of them that I fought, so that it just ends up in B there. Next, I have Elementals. So Elementals for me are synonymous with like I remember going to like Crater Lake, and fighting elementals and stuff like that. And there's other like the Atlan Stone dungeons. It's very like synonymous with the game and the lore. And this is another one that I could easily put in S maybe, but I put it in A because I fought like a fair amount of them, and I think that it's really solid, like for the game and the lore. But it just ended up in A. Next, I have Nath. So these, I remember fighting them in dungeons, and I really think they're cool, but the number of times I saw them is low, so that's what made me put it into B. Okay, next is Lusion, which is an A because my brother and his friends and I spent a lot of time fighting these and going to like the Lusion Citadel outside of like Qualabar, and there's a lot of like things that are synonymous with Lugians that that made it made me see them a lot of times in the game. So that's why they're up there in S. I could see putting in an A, but I think it's an S. Mites, almost an S, I would say, but it's an A. I think the quantity of these was less, so like the number of them that I saw was less, even though I feel like they're synonymous with the game and the early lore and all that stuff. It made me put it in A over S, but it could go either way. Madakar now is like an easy S, could be S plus, because everybody wanted the Madakar hide coat or like the Madakar robe. You know what I mean? Like, so to me, fighting these like and out in the snowy mountains and stuff is like really synonymous with the game in my experience and the times that I spent on it. So this is an easy S plus for me. All right, Marionette I have pretty low here at D. I just didn't see them a lot. I think they're cool, but it just didn't fit as much time for me and with the lore in the game, so that's why it's low. Morseman here we got at A, and the Morseman tunnels, that dungeon is pretty much the main reason why they're in A. Like, I didn't see them much else, like just here a few in there, like on the island and stuff, but it's pretty cool, and I spent a lot of time in the dungeon leveling up before Creepy Canyons here, because it's like some of the best XP you can like get at those Morseman tunnels, and I just think they're cool, so I put them in A. The Manuga, I put here in A also. This is one where it's like synonymous with the game and early lore for me, and it could easily be an S, but I just didn't fight as many of them as the game went on. Like, as I got higher level, I just didn't really fight a lot of these anymore, so the nostalgic kind of like gameplay time factor isn't there as much for me, so that's why I put it in A. All right, next we got Mosswort, which is an easy A, because this is an enemy that you see in all forms and like different levels, from the low levels and beyond, and plus it's part of a couple like big quests and stuff like that from the facility hub and other places. So the Mosswort I could see putting in A, but it's also an easy S for me at the same time, if that makes sense. So next is Makir. I put this in D because I didn't really see these a lot at all, so it's just not there for me, and like my personal experience and my nostalgic factor. So even though I think they're cool, like I just had to put it down there just to be realistic. Next is Nifis. So Nifis, I spent a lot of time fighting these, getting their pearls, and seeing them in the Direlands and around like lakes and stuff like that, or like water sources. I remember just fighting them a lot, so I put them up in A. They could be a B. I could see putting it B, but I think I saw enough of them and fought enough of them to put it in A, basically. Ulthoi, that's an easy S. I mean, there's so many Ulthoi that's like heavily synonymous with the game and the game lore, right? So all the way down from the lowest levels to like pincer turn-ins to everything going up to the matron layers, and there's so many places that Ulthoi are represented. Like, this to me would be an easy S plus if there was another category above, or if this was stretched out a little bit. I think most people would probably agree with that. It's pretty easy S. Okay, so Penguin I put in D just because I don't feel like they're like that interesting or like engaging to me personally, but I do think that they're like decent, but I can't put it any lower than D. So it is what it is. That's just my personal experience, and the number of penguins I saw is low, so I just put it there. Now Fintos wasps I put here at A. This could be an S, but I put it at A because I feel like there's a lot of different varieties of the wasps up to a certain point, and then it kind of caps off, and you don't see a lot of them at like really high levels anymore. So that's the only thing keeping this in A from S, I would say. Rats now I put in B, and I guess maybe this is rabbit that's going to be here, but we'll just keep going. So rats is in B because I do think they're cool, and they are synonymous with like the early lore and stuff, and there's a lot of varieties of them, but for me personally, I just didn't spend a lot of time fighting them, so that's what has me put them in B. Next is rabbit. Okay, there we go. Rabbit. which is I'll put that like that. Um, Rabbit I put in B because you do see them a lot of outside of town, but as far as like being challenging or engaging and interesting, it's pretty low factor for me, so I just put it like in the middle essentially. Reed Shark I put on B because I fought a lot of reed sharks and a lot of different varieties of them, but I feel like it's mostly early game kind of stuff, and you don't really see a whole lot of them late game, like unless you're searching it out, I guess. But I just didn't see in a lot, so I feel like it's kind of like more like the nostalgia factors for the low levels, and it's noteworthy, but it's not like doesn't hit as hard as the ones that are above it. All right, here's Remorin, another one that I think is really cool, but I just didn't see a lot of these ones that were added later, essentially, because most of my retail experience was like, before the expansion packs. And I did play both expansion packs, and I did play up until the servers were closed, but, I have to make the list, and I'm doing it based off of what I saw in my time in game. So, again, that's what that's based off of. Then I got Rush here. I put C because I did see them a fair amount, but I don't like have a whole lot of experience fighting them, and it keeps it lower on the nostalgia factor. Scarecrow, I really like the seasonal aspect of, but again, not something I saw a lot of, so I'm putting it in C. Sclavis, I think, is a really cool enemy, and I think that these could easily be an S, but again, this is one where I think there's more variety at lower levels, and then you tend to don't see them like as many varieties throughout the higher levels of the game. So that's what has me having an A instead of S. Next is Shadow. That's an easy S. This would be an S plus as well for sure. So this again with the greater shadow armor, having to get specs, slivers, all that stuff, dark shards, and there's a lot of variety from like Shadow Child to up from Lieutenant, Umbrus, Panumbris. Like there's a lot of variety in the types that you see, and not only that, I sought them out a lot, especially in shooting for the greater shadow armor. You know what I mean? So that is what puts it up in the S and easily S plus. Now next is Shreth. This goes in A. I think this is another one where there's a lot of variety of them at low levels, and so it has that nostalgic factor, but it just doesn't quite hit S for me personally. Simulacrum here, we have, I think that's a cool enemy, and I just didn't spend a whole lot of time seeing them or engaging with them, so that's what has me having it in C. It's nothing against the design of the character. It's just my own personal experience with the game and my time in the game, right? So next, Cyraloon. These are cool. Like I saw a lot of these on the island, like after they came out, and I think they're cool, but I just didn't spend a lot of time fighting them, like once I got like the dress that you can get from it like one or two times or something, it was kind of like lost its my interest in it. All right, next is Skeleton. I put these in B. This could easily be an A or an S, but I think that it's a B just because of, again, the variety of them is like kind of mainly focused on low levels, and you don't really see a whole lot of ones at higher levels, different varieties. So that has me putting it at B. All right, next is Thrungus. I put this in D just because I didn't have a lot of exposure to these. So that's based off of. Tumorok I put in A or in S actually, because I think this is one where it's really synonymous with the lore and low level quests, and I spent a lot of time with my brother and I like fighting these, and it has that nostalgic feel and like that kind of early game feel. Same with Tusker here. Tusker, this would be an S plus as far as I'm concerned, because Tuskers are like synonymous with almost all levels of the game. There's tiers of them going up to the high levels, so it's a type of mob that you're always seeing and fighting if you're seeking them out. And I spent a lot of times, everything from like like BSD and like like creepy canyons, you know what I mean? There's a lot of places, so like to me this is an easy S plus. All right, so next we got Undead. I put that in S because I spent a lot of time fighting them when they were added, like the higher level like liches and revenants and stuff. I spent a lot of time seeking those out and playing, fighting against those to get loot and stuff when I was kind of like mid, low to mid level. And yeah, so I think this could be an A, but it fits for me in S, so that's why I left it there. All right, Urson, I put in B. I spent a decent amount of time fighting these, but it's not something that's like constantly recurring, so B was good enough for me on that one. Now, Verindi, this is easily an S plus. It's one that you see a lot, like the all different tiers. You know what I mean? You see it low level dungeons to higher level dungeons to like big quests in the game. They're always there. You find them in the Direlands, like they're everywhere. So yeah, Verindi is like one of the most synonymous. They're up there for me with Ulthoi. Like if there was an S plus plus, like Ulthoi would be there with Verindi kind of thing. Like these guys stand alone above. So it's harder to make that all fit though, and just put a few in S, right, and move it down. So I would need more tiers. So I did this according to how much space I had on this, if that makes sense. So Wisp I put in C because I spent a decent amount of fighting them, but it's not like super synonymous with like the game for me, and the lore and all that stuff that I really seek out personally. And then Zephyr I got here in C as well. And these I fought a decent amount, but again, C is good enough. So this is the tier list as I have it. I'll go ahead and put like a still image of that on there too. But yeah, so it's tough to do. It's tougher than it looks to do this, like to start spacing them out as I put them on here. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna run out of room in S, so you know what I mean, like if I do it this way. So I really had to think about like how I wanted to tier these out. And remember, this is a tier list for my own personal experience with the game. It has nothing to do with like the design of the characters. Well, I mean, it does. Like I am considering like what I like about the designs, but again, it's like my subjective experience with the game and my subjective feeling about the mobs, how memorable they are, and how much I liked seeing them and fighting them, and how much they recurred in my time playing the game. So remember, this is subjectively like my list, and if you want to make your own, I encourage you to make your own. So thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you on the next one. Later. Peace.